Obi-Wan Kenobi just stole my bagel. One of the obvious benefits of owning a film car company is the people you meet, and sometimes the famous people you meet. So we got a call to do a shoot, and they requested specifically a car that I really like, the DeLorean. As a child of, teenager of the 80s, that was one of the coolest things you could get until you actually drove one. Don't want everyone to drive one. But awesome car. So we found a DeLorean. We actually had a few DeLoreans in our database in New York. They had a really active, wonderful club. And of course, they do a lot of events where they show up if you're going to do an 80s party or so forth. So we called up and they're like, yeah, what's it for? And I said, it's for a record company. Like, oh, great. Can you tell me about it? I'm like, they won't tell me about it. I think it's a record company, maybe a magazine or something. So we just need it on this date. And the guy's like, come pick it up. Great. So we went and picked it up. We show up to and they've been very secretive. The production company is very secretive about it. So we came in, they're all like, okay, only one of you can come in. One of us. And they're like, yeah, only one. I'm like, well, that'll be me. So it was another one of these up the weird elevator type of studios. We get the car in the elevator, we bring it upstairs and get it in place. And I'm like, who is this for? Like, I'm hoping, is this Michael J. Fox? That would be awesome, but it's a music thing or something. So maybe not him. And then who else would want one? Out steps a prominent fashion photographer who may or may not have said muffin top in another video I did. I'm like, oh, it's you again. And he goes on to make sure that I know that I can't look at the people that are about to come in or watch the shoot, or they're going to move screens around it all. And he walks away. And I'm like, that's not how it works, not in my contract. I keep an eye on the vehicle at all times. And then I'm thinking, what crazy person is this going to be? And in comes the door comes Gnarls Barkley. And I'm like, I know you guys. Like, they don't seem that kind of strung up and uptight. And they weren't. They walked in and Cito's like, hey guys, how's it going, man? I'm like, pretty good. And they sat down and they were just at the beginning of their fame. And it was for Spin Magazine, it turns out. And they were going to do a feature where they dressed up Gnarls Barkley because they were famous for dressing up on stage as the Professor and Marty McFly, and CeeLo as Marty McFly in a very large orange vest. And they got them in makeup and they're like, you can't go in and look at any of this. And I'm like, well, it doesn't appear that they're having any issue. It was just Mr. Muffin Top getting right back into character that everything had to be closed and very exclusive, and he was working with art and all this, whatever nonsense. And that's the personality he always sold, so he could get paid $25,000, $40,000 to take 3 pictures. So he proceeds to start shoving me out and pulling the screens in. And I'm like, I'm staying right here to watch that car. And the production guys who had hired me are like, oh, no. And my first responsibility is to the vehicle and to the owner of the vehicle. So I'm like, I'm staying right here. And he starts getting all Mr. Big and flustery. And I'm like, not going to change anything. Because I can turn into Mr. New Yorker too and just stand here. And you know what? We got a problem? All right, I'm taking the car out of here. And they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, in the contract, I can take it out anytime if I find that it's going to be in danger. And guess what? If I can't watch it, it's in danger. He's got a very scary looking skateboard. So I finally talked him down, and they couldn't believe it because they weren't letting the production guys watch or anybody watch. I was the only person sitting in there like, I mean, nothing happened. And really, the magic of his art is he has 3 assistants set up the cameras, focus them for him, and he goes click, 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 walks out, give me $2,000 for each picture I just took or whatever. It actually worked out great. And lunch came, and I had a few words with CeeLo, with that guy. Both those guys, totally cool, enjoyable all the way to the end, and it turned out to be a great shoot. Another famous person time, if I may drop names. it was quite often because you wouldn't go through the hassle of hiring cars and things like that unless you're going to spend the money. So a lot of times it would be a famous guy for a magazine or something. And one was a certain British guy, well, actually Scottish, and it was for Outdoor Magazine, I think. So again, relatively secret. We weren't sure who it was going to be. And I heard about Scottish, and I thought it was going to be like Sean Connery. So we bring a Defender, I think it was, up to upstate New York, this beautiful hillside, and set up. And I'm like waiting for the talent. So I'm going to go to craft services, which is in an RV. I go in the RV, making my food, and got everything on a plate. And I reach for what appears to be the final bagel. And this hand snatches it away. As I'm reaching for it, I look up, big grin, and I'm like, damn it, Obi-Wan Kenobi just stole my bagel. And there's Ewan McGregor, who's a really nice guy, really big head, but a lot of these guys do. And he's got this big, crazy grin on his face, and he's all like, and you're like, okay, all right, sure. Went out. And the shoot was really cool because they were trying to prove what a rugged individual he was. So they had the truck. But the cool part was they brought in a guy with one of those parasail rigs that has the fan on it where they sit on it. And they're trying to get Ewan McGregor to just teach him right there in a few minutes how to hop in this thing and take off. And that is insane. And also cool. You'd think whoever is in charge of his contractor, his agent, would be like, no way is he going up in the air. But he was just like, absolutely, oh yeah. And he hopped over there, hopped in the damn thing. And then came down the hill a couple of times and got in the air a little bit. I pretty much at that point fell in love with Ewan McGregor. He's awesome. Then there was another slightly secretive music one that we did where they wanted a deuce and a half. And a deuce and a half is a six-wheel military vehicle. And that were from, those things started post-World War II through the 60s, 70s, 80s. And if you ever saw a transport, that's what they are, the deuce and a halves. So we're like, we just happen to have a couple of deuce and a half guys that we can call up. And they're like, great. I'm like, well, what do you need us to do? Like, just bring it to downtown to this location in Manhattan. And we call up our deuce and a half guy, and he's like, oh, no problem. And then we get the call, they're like, oh, we absolutely totally forgot. Can we run the deuce and a half on vegetable oil? Let me find out. So we call my deuce and a half guy, and he's all like, yeah, you can run these on anything. Apparently there's a switch on it. You can switch it to liquid whatever. You can pour in old vodka, and the things will run on it. He's like, yeah, pour in whatever you want in the tanks. It'll run. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, yep, runs on vegetable oil. We're like, oh, that's perfect. That's what we thought. Okay. So we show up this location, kind of downtown Manhattan, and driving a deuce and a half through New York is always terribly enjoyable because this is a massive military vehicle. But there's tons of tolls coming in off of Long Island through Queens and Brooklyn onto Manhattan. And what we discovered and what he showed me, he said, watch this. And he just drives straight at the toll booth and they see a military vehicle and they just go, he goes, I haven't paid a toll since I bought this thing. I'm like, that is awesome. So we come right in, park it. Out come a couple of executive types, young executives. And they're like, oh, great, you're here. And this little team of creative folks come out with banners and things. And we're like, all right, what are you doing? We signed up for this, but we need to know exactly what's going on. And again, it was a production company that called us that I trusted. So I'm like, what's happening? So they wanted to use the vehicle for a band called 30 Seconds to Mars, which had a brief moment of fame in the late 2000s, I guess. And they started stuffing 30 Seconds to Mars CDs in our pockets and whatever we want. Oh, we have a t-shirt and have this. I'm like, great. They cover the sides of it in white banners. And they're like, here's what we need to happen. Today is, and I think it was the MTV Music Awards that they had to go to. We need to drive the band and their groupies, who was like the 30 Seconds to Mars Army or something, in it all the way so they can make their entrance in this deuce and a half. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And they're like, and then they want to, in front of the cameras, pour vegetable oil in it. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, it makes them look green. Like they have this big vehicle, but they're doing it green. It's renewable. That must have been an interesting meeting you guys had when this came up, but sure. So they load up the rig with all these girls and guys, and we get up there. They put the band in it. They pull up. They have this kind of sweeping entrance where limousines and things are pulling up, and we pull up in this god-awful 2.5 belching diesel smoke or vegetable oil smoke. We pull up, and they pull out they had like these gallon jugs of vegetable oil. They had rebranded as their own thing, and they made a big deal about pouring vegetable oil in an old truck, and that seemed to impress people. The level of fame of people you meet can start with like local TV anchors, and sometimes it goes right up there. And one time they needed a 20s, 30s car, open car. And we had a really cool Auburn Speedster replica, but it looked perfect. That way we could drive it without having to worry about scratching it or beating it up, and the owner would let us pick it up. So we went to a studio, and it was a 2-day gig, which was kind of unusual. So the first day we're supposed to be at a studio. The second day we're supposed to be in downtown Manhattan. So we're like, all right, we sign up for it. And they're like, well, it's going to be a prominent individual, so we require discretion. I'm like, we're discretion. That's only another 50%, but we got discretion for you. So we bring the Auburn over to the studio, and it's for Usher. And he's taking over one of the lead roles for the musical Chicago on Broadway. And they're making a big to-do of it. So this was all of his promo shots and things they were doing. So it's him in the suit and the hat, really nice guy, and a couple of the showgirls and things like that. And like went really well, pretty smooth. And I'm like, okay, well, here's where we need to be tomorrow. Find out what we're supposed to do was he's going to come out of the theater, stand in the car, and say hello to his new audience. They're going to make this big announcement, and the fans are supposed to come in cameras, mostly for the cameras. And we thought 100 people and a few TV crews. It was like 44th Street or whatever it was, right off of Times Square. And so we get the car up there, and they've got it all, roped off, put the car in, and they've got half a dozen cops and Usher's little crew of folks, and 2 black Suburbans parked, I noticed, across the street, back to back, facing in opposite directions. I'm like, that must be like the heavy security dudes. So the TV cameras come at the assigned time, and he walks out, and there's like what looked like filler crowd for the camera. People are like, yay! But then word spread through the crowd down to Times Square. Usher's down the road, apparently, was hushed through the entire place because within minutes, it was like an old Beatles movie where you watch them chasing them through the streets. People, thousands of them, start coming down the street and fill the entire area around the car, the entire street, wall to wall of the buildings, and they start pushing in on the cops. And I'm standing by the car. I'm supposed to stay away from any camera lines, but at that point, it was almost impossible. We're being pushed in. People are like, ah, and that kind of pressure from fans, like I can't imagine what it's like to be him at that point. Like this kind of mindless personal attack where they just want to touch you or be near you for no other reason that they listened to your music or saw you do something. I imagine it's how Ed Bolian feels sometimes. But it was bonkers. It felt like it was going to get out of control, and I think that their crew kind of felt that as well because they shut it down real quick. They did a little kind of song and dance, and everybody felt great. They fulfilled whatever they were supposed to do, and they took him into the theater. And I would have expected at that point we were going to pack up the car and leave. People would disperse, but they didn't disperse. They stayed there, and it just kept getting more like. And the cops are pushing everybody away, trying to evacuate them down the 2 different avenues. Then I think they thought that maybe if they just got rid of Usher, that would alleviate it. I'm not really sure. They brought him out again, almost like an encore, and people went, ah! And the security guys grab him and they take him straight to the 2 SUVs. And he goes right between the middle of them, and then he vanishes. It was like this amazing magic trick. You didn't know which truck he was in, or if he was in either truck. He may have gone into the other building. No idea. And they slowly just go, off in either direction, and the crowds followed him, and the streets were instantly clear. It was amazing. Terrifying, but amazing. Do I want to be that famous? No. A little bit? Maybe.
Planning to buy a used car? Want to be on the safe side? Check to see if the mileage has been tampered with. It's easy with the Carly app and adapter. Carly. Learn more at mycarly.com.